Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to talk about whether you should use the Lucas model or the Rowling model. All right, for your storytelling in your Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition campaign. All right, so let's talk about it. All right, so let's get into this. What is the Lucas model and what is the Rowling model? So right now the greatest creators of the age are George Lucas and J.K. Rowling. They have created the largest intellectual properties, and nothing really stands against them. Harry Potter versus Star Wars, nothing really stands against these two intellectual properties. George Lucas had a model which was use many authors. So he wrote the original three, and then he opened up his world to if you lined up 20 people and you counted the number of authors that were involved in the Star Wars novels, in the Star Wars movies, in the Star Wars video games, in the Star Wars television shows, you couldn't count the number of authors attached to Star Wars on 20 people's fingers and toes, right? There wouldn't be enough fingers and toes, right? Let's talk about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, she kept a tight, like throat-tight grip on the Harry Potter world. You could count the number of authors connected to the Harry Potter world. You could count them on one hand, right? Like, she was very, very tight-fisted about who was connected to Harry Potter. She made it a closed world, okay? Now, I know there was a play in there. I think there was a couple video games. But all that stuff was very close to her and very controlled, right? So who was right? Should we have an open model for our Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition campaign building? Or should we have a closed model? And what does that look like? If you're a dungeon master, you're going to be like, oh, well, everything's mine. No, that's not quite correct, right? So there's two models for Dungeons & Dragons. The Thracion model, right? And then the Faerun, Eberron, Theros model, all right? So let's talk about the first one, the Thracion model. Thracion is my own homebrewed world, okay? I used it for about 2 or 3 campaigns. I've run no less than 20 to 40 sessions in it, maybe as many as 60 to 80 sessions, right? And I ran it for a long time, and Thracion was my own world, right? And I was like, hey, this is Thracion. It had 7 floating cities, and each one was ruled by a different sister. It had its own economy. It had different types of weapons. Had different types of creatures, right? But it was my world, and it was very distinct, right? That's a Rowling model, right? There wasn't a lot of influences from a lot of different authors in there, right? Now I'm running a very George Lucas world, right? So what does that look like? Well, in my world that I'm running right now, one, I'm running with multiple authors, multiple dungeon masters, right? And we have material from Theros. We have a portal between Theros and Faerun. And we have a portal between Faerun and Strixhaven. And we have right now, and you know what? We haven't included Eberron yet. But we have a Theros, Strixhaven, Faerun model, right? So authors work from Strixhaven, authors work from Theros, and authors work from Faerun. Those 3 distinct worlds are all in our model right now, right? So Lucas model would be, George Lucas Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition model would be Theros, Strixhaven, Faerun, right? And then J.K. Rowling would be Thracion, my own custom world, and really tight as a drum, very cohesive story, all that, right? Now, which is the better model, all right? Now, a while ago, I would have told you the George Lucas model, and that is what I'm running right now, but I have questions in my mind, and here's why, right? So the George Lucas model seems like it would be better, and the reality is I think Star Wars, yeah, no question, Star Wars is bigger than Harry Potter. No two ways about it. It's a bigger property. It's made more money, and far more has been made on merch for Star Wars than Harry Potter, probably by a factor of 10. All right, so Star Wars is a much bigger IP than Harry Potter. But so why is it a question on whether Rowling was right? Well, here's the issue, right? One of the things we see now is George Lucas opened it up to everybody but control was lost. Boy, oh boy, was control lost, right? So once it was out of Lucas's hands, J.J. Abrams did the last trilogy. So the first trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6. Everybody loved those. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, those were still Lucas's. Everybody hated those. But episodes 7, 8, and 9, people were like, oh my gosh, I long for the days of episode 1, 2, and 3. Episodes 7, 8, and 9 were a complete loss of control, right? And generally, those movies are hated at this point. Because you can't even, and you can't even pretend those movies were good anymore, because Bob Iger took away everybody's ability to even pretend those movies, where he was like, oh yeah, it was just a bunch of junk that we were, throwing up to copy the originals. They weren't meant to be good stories. They were just regurgitation of the old model, right? He said that, right, like flat out in his book. And I'm like, whoa, geez, right? I think he said it a little different, but like he was like, yeah, we weren't trying to make good art. We're just trying to, make the old fans happy again. And you're like, whoa, man, dude. Like it's incredible what he admitted to. I can't believe he downed Star Wars that much in his book, right? So, and now, here's the other things. I am rewatching the Harry Potter 8 films, and man, are they spectacular. They are just tight as a drum, and the storytelling is so much better than the Star Wars world. So I'm really thinking that Rowling might have had it right. Like, keeping it tight, keeping it limited. And I'm not positive that 100 years from now, I think people might really see the brilliance of the Harry Potter books more than the collected gumbo that is Star Wars. I think Rowling is the better model for Dungeons & Dragons. I am using the Lucas model right now, right? So I have to be honest about that. But when I rewatch the Star Wars movies, right, all of them, all 9 of them together, right, and I compare them against the 8 movies that we have for Harry Potter, they are just so shockingly better. The Harry Potter movies are just so more consistent and just fantastic that I think Rowling might have been smarter than Lucas. The more I'm looking at it. So I think Rowling is a better model, and that we should really be thinking about crafting our own Dungeons & Dragons worlds, keeping them tight and keeping them focused on our own vision, rather than including all these world ideas from these Dungeons & Dragons settings. That's my opinion. What do you think? Do you think the Lucas model would be better for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition? That if you're like Ravenloft, Candlekeep, and Faerun, that will work out better than Jackalmoors, your own custom world. Do you think the Rowling model is better or the Lucas model is better? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a very, very wonderful millennium.